Hello and welcome back. This episode is going to be all about Gemini season, which we have just stepped into. So every year, the dates for the astro seasons change. This year, Gemini season is going to be from May 21st to June 20th. And there are some very notable planetary movements going on this season. I mean, as there are every season, but after we explore the themes of this season and how the energy is shifting as we move out of Taurus season, we will then dive into those movements of the planets and the impact that they are going to have on us and on the world. So when it comes to Gemini, Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. It is an air sign. It is a mutable sign. So starting off being an air sign, this is a huge switch up from the slower energy of Taurus. We are going from Taurus, which was earth, it was slow, practical, foundational, step by step, very kind of slow and steady. Now we're moving into speedy, airy Gemini. Now, towards the end of a season, we will always feel the kind of anticipation and the excitement to move into the next season because we've been in a season for a couple of weeks already and we're sick of this energy. We're ready to move on to the next season. So the same way, like by the end of Aries season, I was ready to go into Taurus season. I was like, give me a break from all of this huge energy that's been going on. I need some relaxing and, I need some rest. And now for the past few days, I've been excited to get the ball rolling again once Gemini season hits because I've been like, okay, I feel quite rested. I've been taking things slow. Now I'm ready to get back on that momentum, on that drive. Of course, Gemini season is also my birthday season, so I have that to look forward to as well. And I mean, if you just look at how much I like to talk on my Instagram stories, you will know I'm a Gemini. But at the same time, like I also like to just go completely offline because my Scorpio moon needs that alone time and just to kind of disconnect from everything. But that's another tangent. So that's also a very Gemini trait, by the way. So anyway, coming back to Gemini season, I want to first talk about the shift from Aries to Taurus and then to Gemini. So from Aries to Taurus, this energy is shifting from Aries, which is like getting inspired by an idea, coming up with an idea, having the fire and the motivation and the drive to pursue an idea that you're passionate about, into the energy of Taurus, which was all about planning and building the foundations to execute on that idea. Now, from Taurus to Gemini, I see this shift as expressing. This is the shift to where you're taking what you've built so far and you are starting to now open it up. You're starting to now share this to the world, share this with the people around you. And being the sign of the twins, Gemini season is also about collaborating as well as getting feedback. So if you think about any kind of project or task that you do, there is only so much you can do, you can plan and you can execute and you can achieve on your own. At some point, you need to bring someone else in to mirror or to reflect what you've done. And then from that feedback or from that reflection or that mirroring, you then have the next step to take, right? Like you can then see how might I need to adjust what I've been doing? Is it good to go? Like what is the next step moving forward? Because other people, when they are mirroring to us, they also bring up questions and aspects and facets that we might not have considered on our own. So it's like a fresh pair of eyes. So this is when we're really sharing what we've been doing to the world. So how are we kind of stepping back out into the world and into community after this season that's been more internal, more restful, and hopefully more restorative for your energy as well? Now, when we're talking about air, the element of air is all about the intellect. So this is our thought process. This is our internal dialogue. This is our communication style. this is learning, this is being curious, this is expressing. And Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet that represents the mind. So this season is like double intellect, double mind. It is very, very attuned to being in our heads, which, like everything, has its pros and cons, right? The pros is that this is great if you want to be getting a lot of things done really quickly, if you need to multitask, if you have a lot of things that maybe you've been procrastinating on, maybe, just has piled up in some way. If you need inspiration, if you've been stuck on something and you haven't really been able to figure out how to solve the problem or how to navigate it, this is great to figure out this season. If there have been conversations that you need to have and you've kind of been procrastinating or stalling on, this would be the season to have those conversations. If you have that course that you've been wanting to take, or that book you've been wanting to read, or that thing that you've been wanting to learn, that hobby that you've been wanting to undertake, like this would be the perfect season to dip your toes in or to go for it. On the other side, on the cons list, the same way that our minds and our thoughts jump around a lot and fly by really quickly, air also gets scattered very easily. So if this happens to you, don't punish yourself. First of all, don't punish yourself for being scattered and not being able to focus or concentrate. Just know that this is the energy of Gemini season. And if you have Gemini placements in your chart, this is energy that you live with. So instead of trying to force yourself to focus and to not be distracted and to not be scattered, you need to be letting this energy out in a healthy way. So what I mean by this is there something that doesn't have a big impact on your life? Like for me, this is reading 5 books at once. Like I have Kindle Unlimited, and at any given point, I am in the process of reading at least 3 books. And sometimes as I'm reading, I'll be like, okay, I'm kind of bored of this book. Let me go over to another book, right? So this actually lets me be scattered in a way that doesn't have any real impact on my life. Like me reading 3 different books and me having like 5 different books that are still unfinished doesn't have any real impact on my life and what is important in my life, right? I can always go back and finish it. I can reread things. So when you don't let that energy out, it then starts to leak out and impact important areas of your life. Like before I knew about astrology and I knew that this was an important part of me that I had to let out a bit at a time, I would be like super hard on myself. I would try to be super disciplined, and it just felt like I was trying to, what would be a good analogy? Like I was trying to like run through water. It was like I was just trying to push and force myself to be something that I knew I wasn't, but I also really wanted to be, and I thought it was wrong not to be that. So I know that was a bit of a mouthful. Don't know if that made sense. But basically, yeah, if you are feeling that scattered, procrastinating, unfocused, unmotivated energy, go and do something else. Like let your mind be stimulated by something else and then come back to what you are doing. That is going to be the best way you can kind of move through this energy here. Air is also quick to excite. So often when we get so excited, we're like, I want to do this and I want to do that. I can do this and I want to do that. We often overcommit ourselves. We commit to too many things that we want to do, too many things that we're interested in, and then we get overwhelmed. So just make sure that you are checking back in with yourself on like, it's fine that I want to do all of these things, but realistically, how much capacity and energy and time do I actually have to be able to do this? Am I going to need to, run on like 3 hours of sleep to be able to actually do everything that I want to do? And I think it's always good to just have things in the bank of like, this is what I want to do in the future and I really want to do that. It's okay not to be able to do everything right now. The final kind of con that I want to touch on is that air is all in the mind. Like we talked about, Gemini season is kind of like a double whammy because air is about the mind and Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of the mind. So when it's all in the mind, there can be a disconnect from the body, from emotions, from feeling. So this season, it's really important to remember to consciously slow down, to consciously reconnect and ground back into your body, to connect with your emotions. Now, I just want to kind of speak on mutable energy really quickly. Mutable energy, the simplest kind of explanation is that it's energy that moves in every which way, in every direction, which kind of adds to that scattered energy and that scattered nature that I was just touching on. So again, grounding is going to be really important during this time. It's very easy to get into an anxious, kind of overactivated state. So anything that grounds you, whether that is breath work, whether that is clearing your energy, grounding, obviously, or any kind of physical movement, that is also really, really powerful and impactful for helping you ground back into the present moment and not just live in your head. So let's move on to some of the main themes of Gemini season. So firstly, I want to speak on speed, right? Considering that we just got out of the post Mercury retrograde shadow phase last week, a big theme for this season is going to be around what we have actually learned from that, because Gemini season is all about speed. So how can we go about doing what we need to do quickly and efficiently, but also precisely and deliberately and intentionally? Especially because that Mercury retrograde was in Aries, which had us all reflecting on how we act or speak specifically out of impulse, right? Because with Aries, all of that fire, that impulsive, passionate energy, that Mercury retrograde, yes, it always is about reflecting on how we communicate and how we've been just kind of moving through life. But specifically being in the sign of Aries, it was a lot to do with that impulse. So with Gemini energy, Gemini season that we're moving into, the low road or the more negative and unhealthy way that it can show up is through talking just to talk, being really harsh or abrasive with your words, cutting really deeply with your words. And the healthy side of that, the other side of it, is having meaning and deeper intention behind your words, being able to succinctly express the depth or the nuance or the detail of what you're feeling or what you're thinking. And later on in this episode, when we get into transits or the planetary movements this season, you will see why it is so important, and it was so important to focus on reining in impulse and thinking before speaking or acting. Now, the second theme that I want to talk about is mastering the mind. So this has everything to do with our internal dialogue. So this can be a season where you find that your internal dialogue might be more active, or you're just more in tune, or you're just more aware of what's going on in your mind. So journaling or talk therapy or brain dumping is going to be really helpful this season, using this energy to help you sort through what is going on up in your mind and finding deeper insights and meaning behind what you're going through, what you're experiencing. And that could be what you're currently experiencing, like the current phase of life that you are moving through, or it could be something that pops up, an experience that you've had in the past that suddenly kind of something that happens right now to trigger that memory or that experience. And through expression, you can then kind of connect the dots and find deeper meaning in the insights or the lessons behind what that brought up for you. This is also just a really good time to be more aware of how you are generally thinking about yourself or speaking about yourself, and changing any patterns or habits that you have noticed around that internal dialogue of yours. Now again, Gemini being the sign of the twins, this is almost like you being your own mirror to your internal state and approaching it with curiosity instead of shame or judgment. And actually, speaking of that, in a couple of days, we're actually going to be exploring how to navigate shame and imposter syndrome as you're on your healing journey, as you're on your journey to becoming more empowered, becoming more confident in your authenticity. So we're going to be deep diving into that for our monthly call inside the membership. So you can check out the membership link to either join us live or to catch the replay of our call, and also all the other calls and the deep dives that we've had before. Now, speaking of curiosity, the next thing I want to move on to is communication, specifically speaking, listening, and observing. And I wanted to specify these three categories: speaking, listening, and observing. Because a lot of people think, okay, Gemini, communication, that is speaking, that is expressing, that is finding your words, which it is. That is a really big, important aspect of Gemini season. But remember how we talked about the healthy way this shows up is having meaning behind your words, having an impact with your words. And that comes from listening. So over this next few weeks, think about, in my relationships, do I tend to talk more or do I tend to listen more? When I'm listening, am I really hearing what they're saying from their perspective? Or am I interpreting what they're saying as what I think that they're saying, if that makes sense? And also vice versa, of course. If there are any patterns or habits with how you communicate, or how you've noticed communication patterns are in your relationships, this is also the season to be working on that, or understanding that, or having conversations around unpacking more of that and what you actually want when it comes to effective and impactful communication in your relationships, or respectful communication in your relationships as well. If you've been feeling unheard in certain relationships or friendships or dynamics, this can also be the season to really understand and unpack and navigate that a bit more. And this is where observing comes in as a crucial component as well. So again, this helps to bring in the curiosity instead of judgment or shame. And this isn't just for conversations with other people where you want to be observing and experiences and things you go through in life. This is also observing what goes on for you internally. And the gift of this, and of Gemini season in general, is that it is easier to take a step back from reaction, or from that initial emotional peak, right? That initial intense emotional reaction when something happens. The air and the intellect of this Gemini season allows us to have it to be easier to take a step back, basically, and to create that space that allows you to be more aware of what's going on and think a bit more critically, or just a bit more holistically about how you actually want to respond. So it's almost detaching in a way, where you're just kind of bringing yourself back in from what's going on and landing in your mind and observing and being like, well, what is this reaction of mine? Like, being curious about it, right? Why do I feel so triggered? Why am I feeling this way? What is bringing up for me? So this then kind of leans into the next theme, which is question everything. And I'm going to zoom out and take it global for a second. So over Aries and Taurus seasons over the past 2 months, we've seen a huge increase in how people have been protesting against the oppression and the injustice that's going on in the world. With Aries season lighting that flame, and the Taurus stubbornness to keep going with what they know is right, we've seen so many communities and people coming together. Now, as a response, of course, the people in the systems that are doing the oppressing aren't just going to go down without a fight, right? So we've seen lots of events that have been distracting us and keeping our eyes and attention away from what we're fighting for. As an example, the Met Gala and even the hip hop beef that was going on, that was entertaining, yes, but it took over my entire feed, right? So I'm not saying that all of these things are directly related with trying to distract us, but what I am saying is, given the social and cultural landscape that we're in right now, and knowing what we know about how the media works, the question of why should be at the forefront of your mind always, constantly. Why is this coming out now? Why are they writing it like this? Why is this being positioned to us and given to us at this time right now? And I usually don't like to predict, but I am predicting that there are going to be a lot more conversations around freedom of speech. There are going to be a lot more efforts on limiting expression. There are going to be a lot more efforts on using words to manipulate public opinion or reality over this next month, especially being in Gemini season, when the kind of global collective energy is around speaking and communicating and expressing, and we're moving away from Taurus season, which was much more internal and kind of individual, and now we're going back out. We are like, even more so than before, we're communicating, we're sharing theories and opinions and thoughts. There is going to be much more of a intentional kind of crackdown on free speech, just as like I don't know. Personally, I don't like to predict because I'm not a fortune teller. Astrology is not about fortune telling, but just seeing the pattern of what's going on, I feel like that's quite a safe prediction. So just, keep that critical thinking switch on, keep asking why. Why is this coming to me? Why is this happening right now? Right? So it's just a reminder to think a step further, think a little bit deeper, which allows you to connect the dots between what's happening, which again is another Gemini theme, right? With the whole intellect and curiosity and all those things. Now, bringing this back onto a personal level, this also ties in with the curiosity piece, because compared to the fixed energy of Taurus, which is much more like, this is how we're doing things, this is how it is, the mutable energy of Gemini is really, really conducive for shifting and changing things. So when you're questioning things, when you're curious, when you're asking why, you're moving into a space that allows for more awareness and more expansion. So let's use an analogy here. Think of it as like you're on a hike that you've done for every day for the past month. Right? You're following the path, the same path that you always follow, because that's the path everyone follows. That's what you've always done every time you've hiked this path over the past month. Now, Gemini season, this is when you start kind of looking around and being like, hey, what's that smaller path over there? Why can't I go and explore that? Right? So this is energy that creates space. It's energy that creates possibilities. And this space allows you to not only see that these quote unquote rules that you've been operating by are most of the time arbitrary and self-imposed, but it's also space that allows you to explore different ways of doing these things, which is why, like I said before, it is a great time to adjust any habits or patterns of yours that you are noticing. Finally, the last theme that I want to talk about, Gemini season is related or is connected to your relationships with the most immediate people around you. So especially your siblings and your close friends, because Gemini has to do with your most immediate environment. So again, really taking it back to Gemini being the sign of the twins. This is someone who is on the same level as you, so social or generational level. So this season is all about nurturing your relationships there, building on communication there, catching up, having fun. I know we talked about so many more kind of serious things, but Gemini is known for fun. It's known for being on a more superficial level, which again has both its positive and negatives. Like with the negatives, we talked about talking just to talk. It's also things like gossiping, but the positive of it is just enjoying things as they are on a surface level, having fun, enjoying your life as much as possible in whatever circumstance you're in right now. And it's also a season to carve out time for you to indulge in a fun hobby. Whether it's a show that you've wanted to watch or a book that you've wanted to read or just going out and catching up with friends, like this is very much a season to not forget that we can also enjoy life, and we should be enjoying life as much as we can. And there are things in our life for us to enjoy. So let's move into planetary movements and what is going on in the skies over the next month. So I'll do a quick summary and then we'll go through what the impact of this is in our lives and on a collective level as well. So Mercury stays in Taurus until early June when it moves into Gemini, and then it actually crosses through all of Gemini and moves into Cancer by the end of Gemini season. Venus is in Gemini for pretty much the entire season. Mars is in Aries and moves into Taurus towards the end of the season. And this weekend, actually, Jupiter enters Gemini. So elaborating on that a little bit further, Jupiter stays in a sign for a year. So to make a whole lap around the entire zodiac wheel, it takes 12 years for Jupiter to do that. Now, Jupiter is also the planet of luck and abundance. So if in your birth chart you have your Jupiter in Gemini, congratulations, because you are about to enter your Jupiter return. So this is when Jupiter has gone all around the wheel and coming back to where your Jupiter was. So this is going to be a year of increased luck and abundance and blessings for you. And I want to emphasize that similar to the way that opportunities come, right, we have to also do the work to be able to take that opportunity when it comes. You also want to be continuing doing what you're doing on the path that you're on. The planetary energy of your Jupiter return just gives you a boost towards what it is that you are desiring, okay? But this is going to be a year of luck and abundance for you. So apart from the first week and the last few days of Gemini season, the entire season is pretty much going to have 4 planets in the sign of Gemini. And this is called a stellium, which is when we have 3 or more planets in a sign or a house, but the collective energy doesn't have houses. So this is a really big emphasis and undercurrent of whatever sign it's in. In this case, it's Gemini. And remember how I mentioned earlier that it was really important for us to have gone through that Mercury retrograde in Aries? This is again why, because we have so much of this Gemini influence this season. We have so much of this on our toes, ready to go energy, that when we don't control or we're not aware of what we do on impulse, things can be taken too far very quickly and very easily. So that aside, in this first week of Gemini season, we also have the Sagittarius full moon, and I will be doing a deeper dive into the energy of this and how it affects you personally in my free newsletters. So I will link that in the show notes. But for the first week, we also have Jupiter conjunct Venus, which is a really beautiful energy that is loving, optimistic, joyful. It just feels really yummy and really expansive. Not to mention, it's also sextiling Neptune, which just means that it is in a harmonious aspect or relationship with Neptune, which makes it even more of this kind of warm and fuzzy, loving, nurturing energy. So a really beautiful start to the season. I will just say, watch out for overindulging, especially when it comes to spending more money than you want to or need to, because this energy just feels so good and you want to feel good and you want to have so much fun that it can be really easy to overspend. So just watch out for that. Then on the 6th of June, we have the Gemini new moon. Same as the Sagittarius full moon, I will be doing my deep dive in my newsletter, but this new moon is right next to Venus. So there are themes around relationships with others and also with yourself, and things around self-worth and values. A lot of those things are being highlighted and emphasized during this new moon that we will be having as well. Now, the 11th of June is what I want to focus on for our final planetary movement, our final planetary transit, because this is the day that Mars is going to be squaring Pluto, which means that Mars is going to be in a tense aspect or relationship with Pluto. Now, I see Pluto kind of like the higher octave of Mars, but with more intensity. And both of these planets are already highly reactive. They're quite harsh, they're quite destructive energies, they're quite like abrasive energies. So when they're tense with each other, the potential of conflict and clashes is heightened, both in our personal lives and on a more broad scale. So, zooming back out, the last time that Mars was squaring Pluto was October 7th and October 8th last year, which, as we all know, was when the current genocide of the Palestinians began. Now, I don't say that to fearmonger. Like, if you know my work, that is not what I use astrology for. But it doesn't mean we just bypass the truth of the impact of these energies. This is why I've really been trying to emphasize the importance of that Mercury retrograde we just went through and we had in relation to impulse control, so that we are able to respond from a more empowered and knowledgeable and balanced state. So, like I said before, astrology is not about fortune telling. I cannot say exactly for certain what is going to happen, but knowing that this energy is approaching is important, because then we can prepare for this energy and we can start noticing the signs of what could potentially happen as we get closer and closer to this energy. So it's not like it's going to be like the one day. Oftentimes these big transits, it's a couple days before, a couple days after. So as we're gearing up for it, start noticing what's going on both in your personal life and also collectively. If there are things that seem kind of, I don't know what the right word is, like sketchy or dangerous, just make sure that you are protecting yourself and your loved ones, okay? So that brings us to the end of this episode on Gemini season. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are enjoying the podcast, I would love for you to rate and review it so that more people can listen in and receive all of this info as well. Now, in the show notes, you will find all the links I've mentioned, as well as a link to join my free astrology community, which is where I go live every week to answer any questions you have on astrology or your spiritual journey in general. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next episode.